Welcome to Dental Momentum, the podcast dedicated to lively discussions on business and financial strategies tailored for dental business owners. At Duckett Ladd, we're committed to transforming your business journey and supporting you at every stage. Join us as we delve into the keys to long-term practice success, from cutting-edge accounting and strategic tax planning to personalized business strategies. Together, let's propel your dental practice forward with unstoppable momentum.
So maybe one thing, I'm just thinking out loud here, like me being that dental practice owner, and you're telling me these additional things I need to be doing maybe on a daily basis, month-end basis, and it's like, David, man, I get to the end of the day, I'm tired, I'm wiped out. I mean, my neck hurts, I just want to go home, or I need to go to my kid's game. I think I'm good. I don't have time to do that. You have to hear that all the time, right?
I hear that all the time. And here's what I say to those people. You know, if you don't want to accept the responsibility that comes with being a practice owner, don't be one. There are lots of alternative careers that you could have in dentistry that don't require that. But if you decide that I'm going to sit in the big chair and I'm going to be the owner, with that comes a certain amount of responsibility. And I define the level of that responsibility as being about 10 minutes at the end of each day and around an hour and a half to 2 hours at the end of each month. And if you don't want to do that, fine, just look for an alternate career.
Yeah, not significant time, but huge ROI, if you will, on the preventative side.
Yeah, and I guess I would kind of take that question, David, and if someone does have access and then they also have the ability to manipulate the PMS, I mean, do you tend to find that there's always markers or breadcrumbs in there that if they're looking at the right metrics, the right data, it tends to show itself out over time?
It's there somewhere. And again, if you know, somebody who wants to steal revenue has two choices. Either I just divert some of the deposit and I don't enter any particular concealment transactions in practice management software. And that's relatively easy to find, to do the basic step of comparing collections against deposits. And yet in my experience, Bill, probably 85% of practice owners don't do that basic step.
That's a start today step.
They have, yeah, it is. They have opened themselves up so that a lazy, not terribly smart thief can successfully steal from them. And I have seen hundreds of thousands of dollars stolen from a dentist because they don't do that basic check. No, let me rephrase that. I have seen hundreds of thousands of dollars stolen from many dentists because they don't do that basic step. The problem with finding the stuff in practice management software is there's a lot of information in software. I looked at Dentrix in particular the other day, and the version of Dentrix I was looking at could generate 112 different reports.
Yeah.
For a dentist, that's mind-boggling. And, you know, how would I ever find time to look at all those reports? And the short answer is nobody's really looking for you to do that. There are 4 or 5 basic reports in most practice management software. And again, we've talked about the daily versus monthly stuff. But you need to spend a little bit of time with your receivables report. You need to look at the adjusted and deleted transactions reports. You know, sometimes those come as 1, sometimes they come as 2. And probably a couple of other reports in your software are really germane to what you do.
And this may be way too simplistic, David, and if it is, just kind of pull me back. But, you know, I'm just kind of thinking through, let's go through that first scenario where someone does not have the ability to conceal that, you know, take in those checks, the cash, whatever the case may be. So the deposits aren't matching up. Presumably, over time, a couple things are going to get out of whack because your collection percentage is probably going to be terrible. It's not going to be kind of where it needs to be. And like you said, your AR is probably going to start ballooning up, and over time, the aging will become somewhat hard to ignore, I would think. And I know people probably goes years without really seeing it, but I mean, are those two kind of lagging indicators that would say, hey, you know, there's something broken that we may want to look into?
They may. I mean, I get asked a lot, and I have I have had interactions with consultants who are very convinced that if embezzlement was happening, it would show up in ratio somewhere. And it may not. And the reason is the typical embezzler takes 2 to 4% of collections. Now, relative to the doctor's take-home pay, that's a big amount of money. You know, when you think that a practice might have 60% overhead, and now what I'm taking is between 5 and 10% of a doctor's take-home in that scenario. You know, that's in terms of the effect on their lifestyle and their retirement and things, that's huge. But its distortive effect on practice ratios is pretty small. If somebody is taking payments and not entering anything into practice management software at all, which isn't how most thieves do it. But yeah, if I just pocket money and I don't post a payment, now the receivables will start to climb and will eventually get up to a pretty big number.
Got it.
That isn't the pattern most thieves follow. Most thieves will enter a payment or an adjustment or something so that they don't have patients walking around owing much more in practice management software than they actually owe. That gets thieves caught pretty fast.
And that makes sense. That's where you're seeing the collections per the PM is higher than what's hitting QBO, and it's not a timing difference. Makes sense. Yep. Yeah,
I mean, what you might see would be the adjustment percentage of gross climb, for example. That's a common manifestation, but and again, these guys know this. I'm talking to the audience now. Bill and Jared know this well. There's inherent variability in most ratios just because of the fact that the way this year is going to unfold for your practice is always going to be a little different than last year. You know, the mix of PPO versus cash patients is probably a little bit variable in most practices, and that will cause organically that same kind of variation. So separating out what is embezzlement caused by what happened just because, again, every year is a little different in most practices is challenging.
Yeah. So I'm going to put you on the spot, but I think you can handle this.
I'm good.
What you mentioned, Dentrix or whatever, 120 different reports, right? And then you said like 4 to 5 basic reports. What are those 4 to 5 basic reports that dental practice owners should be looking at the end of every month? You mentioned a month end, AR aging. Like, what are the other ones that they should? It's like non-negotiables. You have to look at this.
Yeah. One thing I want to look at, and so we already mentioned looking at receivables.
Yep.
And we could spend an hour talking about what to look at on a receivables report. One thing that I want to see is kind of the percentage of receivables that are more than 30 days old, 30 to 60, 60 to 90. Look at the aging and see if there's an adverse trend there, and that's to go after that thing that Bill was asking about a minute ago. Well, what if somebody just takes money and doesn't post payments? That's where that will show up. But beyond that, we tell dentists repeatedly, as I'm sure you do, that receivables are something that have to be managed. I mean, money just doesn't come in with no effort. And, patients that have balances need to be followed up on. What I always tell dentists when they're looking at their receivables report is get your software to print 2 reports, one that has patient balances and one that has insurance balances, because the causes of those balances and the corrections of outstanding balances for those 2 are different. With patient balances, the biggest contributing factor is staff just can't be bothered sending statements. Or, pursuing more aggressive things if the statements don't bring in the money, like calling the patients.
Yeah.
And ultimately sending them to collections. Those kinds of things tend to fall by the wayside. And so let's look at patient receivables on one report and insurance receivables on another. What I find with a lot of practices is when insurance claims get rejected by an insurance company, it's very easy for the process to get broken after that. Because when you think about it, that takes that claim out of an automated process into a manual one. And I don't know this for sure, But there's a fair amount of speculation now that insurance companies who realize that if they reject 100 claims, that 40 of them will never get resubmitted, are just rejecting claims for fun. Because it makes them money. And insurance companies are increasingly using AI now to do initial screening of claims. You know, a dentist said to me the other day that a claim for scaling and root planing got rejected because there was no tooth number specified. Right? Well, scaling and root planing is 32 or some lesser number of teeth. You know, there's no specific tooth for that procedure, but the AI rejected it because of that. Now, again, whether the insurance company has kind of told its AI, okay, dial up the number of claims you reject, or, you know, AI just hadn't got that smart yet, I couldn't tell you. But again, if that claim is rejected, there's some probability it will never get resubmitted by the practice. Apparently, tooth number 0 works for that.
Just real quick, David, before you go on to other reports, what's interesting there is that's such a great tip anyway, because even if it's not malfeasance of some sort on either one of those reports, it could be an indicator of a broken process in your RCM. So that's a great tip to do anyway, and I think a lot of people don't focus on that like they should until cash gets tight, and then they start looking at that.
I mean, let's be clear that the things that we're telling dentists to do aren't exclusively to look for embezzlement.
Yeah.
You know, really what I'm about, and I know what you guys are about, is putting dentists in the financial driver's seat.
100%.
Yeah, just get better in general, for sure.
Yeah. So absolutely, Bill. The looking at your receivables that way is not only for embezzlement. You know, in most practices, there can be a much bigger problem, and if, as I said, thieves might steal 2 to 4% of your revenue, but it's easy to lose 30% if your insurance process is broken. You know,
yeah.
if your basic revenue cycle management isn't being done correctly. So good point. I'm really glad you brought that up. So we talked about receivables. We talked about day end stuff and month end stuff. What else should a doctor look at? As I say, I want to look particularly at adjustments. And also at deleted or modified transactions. Those are kind of my hot list. Definitely a lot of other things that could be looked at. And let's look at payroll. Mm-hmm. If a doctor has completely handed payroll off to a staff member, sooner or later things are going to go wrong.
Yeah. So, David, I'm going to take us in a little bit of a different tangent, but kind of in that vein of prevention. You know, both Jared and I have, you know, we're the public accounting world. We've come from an auditing background. You know, we would assess internal controls and all those kind of things. And that's kind of a little bit of a buzzword. And sometimes reality clashes, you know, with the hypothetical and what's in a perfect world. So you're talking to a small practice owner, and they want to try and have internal controls, which we could call segregation of duties, probably is a better way to put it. How would you speak to a smaller practice to say, you can have meaningful segregation of your duties to try and mitigate as much? I think that's the big phrase, is mitigate. You can never completely eliminate a lot of times, but mitigate the opportunities of fraud.
Yeah, and let's define for the audience what we're really trying to achieve with segregation of duties, because what I find about this topic is dentists are told to segregate duties but aren't given a whole lot of specifics about how, and I'm going to tackle that in a minute. And the second thing is they're not really told why. The point of segregation of duties is very simple. If Bill is a practice owner and I work for Bill and I wake up tomorrow morning and decide that I should be stealing from him, the point of breaking up jobs is to make it so that if I am going to steal from Bill, I have to go to one of my coworkers and say, I want to steal from our boss, but I need your help. Mm. In other words, the point of segregation of duties is to force collusion.
Yep.
And what we know statistically is that if I have to do that with somebody I work with but probably don't know all that well, that will stop about 80% of would-be thieves in their tracks.
That's huge. Huge.
Yep, it's huge. So that's why we're doing it. Let's talk about how. And what I do when I talk to dentists about segregation of duties is I give them 3 rules. And I say, if you follow these 3 rules, your chances of being stolen from go down to almost zero. And the 3 rules come from looking at the tasks in the revenue cycle. So there are really 6 activities that have to happen for a dentist to have money in their bank account. And let me go through them. The first thing is that treatment has to be entered in a practice management software. Then patients and insurance companies get billed. Then hopefully they pay. Those payments get what the accountants would call posted. In other words, entered in a practice management software. At the end of the day, there's a balancing activity, and then bank deposits get made. So again, treatment gets entered, payers get billed, they pay, the payments get entered into practice management software, there's balancing at the end of the day, and then there's a bank deposit. Those are the 6 jobs in the revenue cycle. Here are my 3 rules. The first rule is really simple. The only people who should enter treatment in a practice management software are clinicians who were in the room when the treatment was done. So if we're talking a doctor's operatory, typically it's the assistant who enters treatment into software. If we're talking a hygiene operatory, it's either the hygienist, or if you're doing assisted hygiene, the hygiene assistant who enters treatment. And what this does, guys, is it changes the dynamic of embezzlement. So if treatment is entered by the clinician, by the time the patient stands at the front desk, they already owe the practice money. And any stealing that's going to happen has to do something about that patient balance, and whatever's done about it is going to be permanently entered into practice management software. On the other hand, if treatment is entered at the front desk, which used to be the way it was done when there was only one computer in the whole practice, like when practices started computerizing, that was the only way to do it, but some offices have never moved beyond that, even though you have operatory terminals in every operatory now. It makes stealing much easier because the patient standing in front of you is starting with a 0 balance. And I could find a way to steal and just leave that balance at 0. Mm-hmm. So that's rule number 1. We've got 5 tasks left, which again are billing, getting paid, entering the payments, doing the balancing at the end of the day, and then making a deposit. So I have 2 rules for those 5 jobs. And my 2 rules are nobody should do more than 2 of those jobs. And the 2 they do cannot be consecutive. So, for example, whoever does balancing at the end of the day is not the person who makes the bank deposit. That has to be somebody separate. Now, to Bill's question, which was really about if we're talking to somebody in a small office, how do we achieve this? If you have a big office, if you have 5 front desk staff and an office manager, it's pretty simple to achieve the right amount of division of duties. In a small practice, you have to get a little more creative. For example, it might be one of the duties of your assistant to do balancing at the end of the day. And one easy one for a doctor to do is get the mail, which is receiving payments. And when I say get the mail, I don't mean that the mail comes into the front desk and somebody puts it on the doctor's desk. I mean, the first person who has control of the mail is the practice owner. So typically we're talking about a post office box that the doctor swings by on the way to work and picks up the mail. And for the accountants, there's an obvious benefit in terms of the vehicle expense you can claim, but that's a discussion for another day. Yeah, now we're talking. So doctor's the first person to have control of the mail, opens the mail, looks at it, and then hands it to receptionist or distributes it. That's receiving payments. So little creativity, but you can definitely get there. As I say, it might mean that clinical staff have some responsibilities in what happens in the front desk, but there are definitely a couple of one and done tasks there. The other option, of course, is outsourcing. So there are companies in the insurance claim submission and processing business that will post the payments for you, and that's another way to achieve some segregation.
Mm-hmm. So those 3 things, the clinicians are the only ones that enter treatment. Number 2, nobody should do 2 of the 6 tasks, and then number 3, nobody should do any consecutive tasks, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Those are my 3 rules.
So that's gold right there. If you're listening to this, rewind this like, I don't know, 6 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is, and jot those things down. I mean, I've got them listed down.
Well, actually, get them tattooed on your arm. It'll work
There
a
you
lot
go.
better.
That's 6 tattoos, man. Or I guess 3, but interesting. So this might be a silly question. You mentioned this kind of at the beginning a little bit, but if I'm thinking about this high level, and this is very simplistic, but you got a hiring issue sometimes, which allows people to come in and commit fraud, let's say it, and then you've got a process issue. If you're looking at those 2 processes, if you will, like your overall internal process and your hiring process, should you focus more on your hiring process? I think I know what you're going to say, or more on your internal processes to get stuff tightened up? Or is it just both, man? You just got to fix the both.
You need both. I mean,
Yeah.
The thing about hiring is it's one and done.
Yeah.
This isn't something, hopefully, that you have to do every day. If you do, you have way bigger problems than embezzlement. But the problem with hiring properly is it requires a mindset shift. If you sit, and I've done this many times, you stick 40 dentists in a room and you say, how many of you, raise your hand, how many of you enjoy hiring staff? No hands go up. Dentists hate this job. And it's like any job that we hate, guys, you look for an off-ramp.
Yeah.
The job I hate is cleaning the garage. And my
Abdicate.
happy moment is I'm cleaning the garage and my 22-year-old son wanders by. Okay, and doesn't look terribly busy,
And then he quickly disappears when he sees you clean the garage.
Get in here and help me. No, he has to go right by on the way to his car. So I've got him where I want him, Jared. Dentists hate hiring, and it's challenging because people quit on short notice. And this problem of starting with 20 resumes and getting down to the 3 you want to interview and picking the right person, that's all very daunting. And when we ask people, okay, now you have to layer one more overlay on this, which is, what if what these people are telling you isn't true or isn't the whole truth? It gets very challenging. So I get that, but you only hopefully do it, a couple of times a year. So just do it right.
Makes sense.
Because, when you don't call former employers, or you don't do a criminal record check, or you don't do drug testing, bad things happen. And, if keeping bad people out of your practice is a permanent solution. If you let them in and then you're trying to outsmart them with controls, that's challenging.
Well, and maybe that's a good way to kind of circle back on that behavioral, because presumably not all thieves are hired in and new employees. I mean, some of them probably maybe have been working with you forever. That's one thing Jared and I were looking at your webpage, and if people haven't been out there to check out, is it the Wall of Shame? Is that what you call it, David? Where you kind of see
the Hall of Shame, yes.
Hall of Shame, the mug shots. These look like people that probably going to church with, maybe people that know your family. I mean, is there a typical avatar, or is it just all across the board of what these kind of thieves look like?
Let's go back, Bill, to why people steal. And people basically steal for 2 reasons. And I call them need and greed. So needy thieves are what it sounds like. Their spouse has lost their job, and suddenly this family can't pay the bills anymore. And, you can maybe keep the balls juggled for a couple of months, but then, your credit cards hit the roof and you're 2 months behind in your mortgage and you're about to lose your house. And, some of those people will steal. Well, that's situational. I mean, that could happen to anybody who, they could be an employee for a long time, or you could have hired them last week. Then you have greedy thieves. And greedy thieves basically feel like society's not rewarding them properly for their talents. So they're really stealing to address an ego deficit. And my hypothesis is, that their character was formed years ago. This is kind of narcissistic behavior, if you like, and there are markers of that at hiring. Now, the narcissist could have been with you for 20 years. They've probably had narcissism for 20 years, and they just haven't acted on it until now. But the markers are there.
Do you feel that one's more prevalent than the other?
No, it actually, interesting question. It's really driven by the business cycle. So when, when times are tough, and if you want to go back to a couple of times when I could see a noticeable increase in greedy thieves, it was the economic crash in the first decade of this century, sort of 2005 to 2009, and during COVID. And those were the times when the needy thieves were really more prominent. And, it was in each case, there were these big shifts going on in the economy at the time, and a lot of people kind of got ground up in them. And eventually there was stimulus money in COVID that kind of stabilized it. But the first couple of months of COVID, a lot of, if your spouse worked for an airline, they were furloughed. And no money coming in, and that caused theft. The greedy thieves tend to come out when the economy's clicking along nicely, because what they see is they see their friends who maybe are in sales jobs or own businesses or in real estate or something like that, and they see those people getting ahead faster than they are, and that bothers them.
Interesting. So I think when we started this podcast, we said, man, we could chat forever. I mean, we could still go on and on and on. So we're going to have you back, David. I do have one question that might lead to another, but as we kind of start looking at wrapping up, going back to, I think you said 1989 and pegboard, right? And now we're 2025, and I'll just say AI, and in the age of technology constantly evolving quickly. Has it, with the evolution of technology, computers, right? You had BC, now we're AC. Is it easier to commit fraud today with the technology, or is it harder to do it today?
That is an easy question. Technology has made it way, way, way easier.
Easier to commit fraud.
Gosh, yeah.
Oh, so your job is harder today than it was.
My job is harder, but I think it's really, technology changes the interaction between doctors and their staff. And it creates opportunities for a thief that the practice owner may not know are there. As I said a while ago, if you have in a pegboard system, a doctor looking at pegboard, it was pretty easy and simple. You could even see the person's handwriting who made individual entries. So you had you were with pegboard, Jared, you were looking at transactions. Your day-end process involved basically a review of raw transactions. In practice management software, what you're looking at are reports. And reports, by their definition, are an abstraction of transactions. So the doctor's kind of getting further away from the raw information, and staff are standing in between. So that structure creates opportunity.
Yeah. So the simple, right, going back to pegboard, it was simple. The more complex it gets along the way makes it just more complex in general to
question.
Things,
and technology is the embezzler's friend. The fact that insurance companies have online portals, where you can go in and you can change certain things in your insurance setup, that opens doors. Different payment methods open doors, and I mentioned early on Venmo. Patients are used now to being able to pay electronically. They don't necessarily pay a whole lot of attention to where that money ultimately goes.
Yeah, they don't really care as long as it goes out of their bank account.
Well, let me put a point on it. Remember the day when you used to get your bank statements back, and attached to the statement was the actual canceled checks. I mean, the original checks that you wrote.
Yeah.
And you can look at the front and the back of them, and you can see where which bank the check went to if you were really curious. Less people do that now. Your checks come your statements come electronically. Some people look at them, some people don't. You see scanned images of the checks that are a whole lot harder to read than the original checks were. Certainly for that information on the back, as the check goes through the clearing system. So that creates opportunities.
Yeah. So do this, David, as we wrap up. Like, first off, I want you to tell people how they can reach out to you, and contact you. But maybe I'll ask this question. So why should people reach out to you? Like, if you're a dental practice owner and you're thinking, oh, like, after I've heard some of this, I think something might be going on. Or what if they're like, yeah, I heard some of this, but I'm good. Should they still kind of reach out and like get some info, or like where's your head at on that?
We offer basically 3 services to people.
Yeah.
The first thing we do is what we call proactive services, and that's where we work with a practice owner to help them put the controls in place that will lessen their risk. And to every dentist listening or watching this, I will say that what I do has a lot of parallels in what you do, in the sense that if a patient came to you and said, "Doctor, I want to spend the least money on my teeth in my lifetime, what should I do?" You would advocate prevention. Brush and floss like you mean it, see our hygienist every 6 months, or maybe even better every 3 months, because the aggregate cost of those things is going to be a whole lot less than you spending a lot of time in my chair while I fix what you broke. I'll say the same thing. If a dentist really wants to make this problem the least painful financially and the least painful emotionally, prevent. And we offer preventive services. If you are somebody who after this conversation has your spidey senses tingling, then I'd love to talk to you about our audit options. And we have a couple of products there, including a superficial look that's called First Look. And the goal of First Look is really to see if somebody needs an audit or not. So how to reach us? Very easy. You can go on our website, which is www.prosperadent.com. And there's a Contact Us tab there, and you can fill in a form, and we'll send you back a booking link where you can make a time to chat.
Love it. What was the third service? You have the preventative, the audit. What was the third?
The third one is First Look, which is really an overview look. So the kind of thing we'll do there, Jared, will be compare collections and deposits for a time period. We will look at the audit trail. We'll look at deleted and modified transactions. And the goal of First Look, which costs $1,500 and is normally completed in a week, the goal of First Look is to come back to you and say either, we don't see anything here that really screams at us that you need an audit, or we are seeing some anomalous transactions. An audit will determine whether they're embezzlement or incompetence or something else.
Yeah, this is
So
gold, David.
it's an easy entry point, low barrier to entry for somebody who's really not sure. Sometimes people will call us and I'll say, look, we already know what First Look is going to say. You've told me there's an $80,000 discrepancy this year between your collections and deposits. That's very unlikely to be timing. So we know we're going to have to look. Let's skip over First Look and get into a full audit.
Yeah. This is great information. I love the preventative side of things that you guys do. I mean, it's kind of like going to the gym, right, to try to prevent that heart attack or whatever. Absolute gold. And Bill, what other individual in the industry, right, that has the experience that David has on? I would fair to say, or David, you've seen almost everything, right? You've seen almost everything on what can happen in a dental practice. So when you're peeking under the hood of a dental practice, it's not like the first time you've seen the engine of this car, right? You know how this thing operates and how it misfires.
We know what to look for. I mean, we are continually seeing new methods. And you asked me about technology a few minutes ago, Bill, and I said technology makes it way easier. So we keep seeing, I'll call it innovation on the part of embezzlers. But yeah, the basics don't change a lot.
Yeah, I love it. David, we appreciate you having us, or we appreciate you coming on and chatting. And I'm fair to say we're going to have you back on to talk deeper. And maybe we can go into a deeper specific topic. This is a great overview, but there's so much in what you do and so much that dental practice owners need to be on the lookout for. So great information, man. We appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me, and I would love to come back.
Let's do it.
Thanks, David.